Hello students, today we are going to discuss velocity sensor. Now what is velocity sensor? To measure velocity of any component, we use some sensors. Those are called as velocity sensor, and in this velocity sensor we are discussing now tacho generator. Now what is tacho generator? Or I think in HP lab you have seen what tachometer to measure the velocity of turbines and all. If you have not, then I'll explain you how it works. Okay. Whenever you are measuring any velocity of a component, I'll draw one turbine diagram like this, simple turbine diagram. Okay. Turbine like this, water is coming from here, and there is a turbine blade, and it will rotate, and after that water is going out. Okay, while rotating this, what will happen? Shaft will get rotated. If this is the shaft, that is getting rotated, and it is connected to generator. Okay, now to measure with what velocity it is rotating, what we use one meter, something it look like this, having some rubber end at that point, and you can see numbers over here with what velocity it is running that turbine. Now inside this machine, what things are used to measure the velocity of any turbine or any rotating component, that I'll explain. Now what we do, we connect this tachometer to this rotating shaft. Now inside this, what is there? There is one shaft, and shaft is connected with a gear. It looks like a gear, but it is not exactly gear. It having tooths. Like this. It is having teeth like this, and this is made up of, and so on. Okay, this is made up of this tooth wheel is made up of ferromagnetic material, and in front of that we keep one coil that is called as pickup coil. Okay. We keep a pickup coil, and this is output. Whatever things are happening over here in terms of electrical signal, we are getting output at this end. Okay, now what actually things are going over here, that I'll explain you. Now when this wheel is rotating, what will happen? It will cut the magnetic field. This is magnet we are having, and one coil is there along with the magnet, and whenever magnet is there will be having some magnetic fields. Like this. Now the ferromagnetic material, when cuts the magnetic field, what will happen? It will generate electricity. That electricity we are getting at this two points, terminals, and with help of that we can check the what is the velocity of that component. Now when wheel is rotating, what will happen? At one time the gap between the coil and wheel is very less. That time what will happen? Magnetic field will be like this. And at some time after that, coil and wheel having more gap. After rotating, more gap. That time magnetic field will be like this. So some pulse will get generated, and with help of whatever pulse are getting generated, you are getting some electricity in terms of pulse, and that will help us to find the velocity of the any component. With what velocity it is moving and all we can determine. Now what are the application of this? We can use these things in cars. Now bikes are coming with the digital meters, so there also we can use this, or to measure any turbine velocity, any motor velocity, wherever any rotating velocity has to be measured, there we can use this type of tachometer. Okay, now we'll come to the next AC generator form of tachometer. In this we are having two magnets placed like this. North pole, south pole, and in between that there is a coil. When coil rotates, what will happen? It will generate, due to cutting the magnetic flux, it will generate some electricity at this point. So when electricity is getting generated, we can find how much velocity it is having. Okay, how we can find that? With sometimes we cut the magnetic field very fast, sometimes we cut the magnetic field very slow. When we are cutting the magnetic field very slowly, that time very less current will get generated, and when we are cutting the magnetic field with very high speed, that time more current will get generated, and with the help of this only we can determine velocity of that component. Now next is force sensor. Now force sensor means what? It means what? If you want to measure any force on a component, that time we can use some sensors. Those are called as force sensor. And to understand this sensor, we will take the example of strain gauge load cell. Now what is strain gauge? I told you strain gauge is a very thin element which is in shape of like this, and it is printed on means you can think how much thin it is. It's like a stamp. If you put a stamp, how it look like that you can print on any machine. for example, I'll give you invitation card. If you put your fingers on an invitation card, what you will feel? You will feel those letters are embossed, or those are coming out, and you can feel those letters, isn't it? Like that only we print this kind of strain gauges on any element. Okay, those are called as strain gauge. Strain gauge, what it does? It measures the strain developed in the body. What is strain? If this is the bar and if you put a load, force, what will happen? This will change its length. Original length is L and change in length is delta L. So what is strain? Strain is change in length to its original length. This is how we can measure the strain. And to determine this, we are using strain gauges. Okay. Now, what is strain gauge load cell? It is like a one solid component like this. Okay. Solid component, and on that component we print some strain gauges like this. Now, how it works? When you put a load, what will happen? That solid component is getting compressed like this, isn't it? Now it is getting compressed means what? The strain gauges are identifying how much change in length is happening over here. Okay, when you put a load or force, that time strain gauge can determine how much change in length is there. Okay. Now, with help of this, we can determine what amount of force is applied on that component. And that force and this type, okay, leave that force. So this type of strain gauge load cell are used in some weighing gauge machines or weight bridges where more amount of load we have to measure, like trucks and all, where we measure on weighing bridge. Or there also we can use this type of cells, or to measure impact load. Okay, so there we can use this type of strain gauge load cell. Okay, next we will learn fluid pressure sensor. Now fluid pressure sensor means what? A pressure of any gas or liquid we can measure over here. Okay, or with which help a sensor which used to measure the gas pressure or liquid pressure, that we can call it as a fluid pressure sensor. Now normally it is having diaphragm and it is connected to strain gauge. Now how it look, I'll show you. Now this is the sensor and it's having one diaphragm like this. Okay, diaphragm is nothing but one elastic component which can we can say it's look like a cloth or a leather, but it is having some elasticity. Okay, and strain gauge is provided over here. And this is diaphragm, and we put pressure, any pressure, fluid pressure or gas pressure or liquid pressure from this side. What will happen when pressure is coming inside of this sensor? This diaphragm is trying to stretch outside. When it is trying to stretch, strain gauge will identify with what amount of it is getting stretched, and with help of strain gauge and with the calibration we can determine how much pressure we are putting inside of this. So this is how fluid pressure sensor works. This is also called as diaphragm pressure gauge. Diaphragm pressure gauge. Now another we will learn a pressure gauge, that is Bourdon tube pressure gauge. Now I think in last semester, fourth semester, I have explained you Bourdon tube. It is an elliptical tube which is bent like this, and pressure is inserted from this end, and the end of the tube is connected with the gear mechanism like this. Gear arrangement will be provided over here, and that gear arrangement connected to the indicator. When we put a pressure inside this tube, what will happen? This tube try to become a straight. I have given an example for this. A toy which we used to a toy like this, which having some sound, and it is something like this. Okay, when you blow a air here, what will happen? This will get straight. This will get straight. The same thing Bourdon tube is also work. On the same thing Bourdon tube also work. When the pressurized air is inserted, Bourdon tube will try to get straight, and that time it will rotate this gear with the help of a gear arrangement, and the pressure we can determine from this. This called as a Bourdon tube pressure gauge. Thank you.